Sorry. Cool. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of Ocean Protocol and their ability to kind of tokenize any data or AI assets, and why tokenizing it can lead to kind of greater capital structures for financing this AI space, and why kind of this ability for crypto to unlock new types of capital structures will be kind of more of one of the silver bullets for kind of adoption of crypto and AI. Awesome. So cool. So starting off today. So what is Ocean Protocol? Well, it's an open source protocol for on-ramping data and AI assets to crypto rails. We provide a different suite of tools for being able to transact and kind of within this ecospace between being able to tokenize your assets and then being able to have a framework for running computation on them while preserving privacy. Today, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the ability to tokenize your assets with Ocean Protocol. So the basic way I can think about it is when we take an NFT as a vehicle to represent one-of-one ownership. And so your decentralized identifier will represent an asset. Such it could be a data set, it could be a model, it could be an API endpoint, it could be an S3 bucket, just anything that can represent an asset, it's stored there. Then the DDO information, this will involve all the information such as who is the owner, what type of license is attached to it, what are the credentials needed to access it. All the information that are related to ownership of an asset is stored and encrypted directly on the NFT using it as a vehicle. And now in order to be able to share and share access to that, you can use data tokens, which are ERC20s. And so this allows for creating flexible sublicenses against the same asset. So that's, for example, you can create one with a commercial license where you can download it for 7 days for $100. Or you might want to make it so a commercial license where for 1 day you can run computations on it. Or you might want to have another license where you can download it for free, but only for non-commercial purposes and for research only. And so it allows for flexible things for the same asset. And so the cool thing about this is it really allows kind of like having an infrastructure where we're repurposing NFTs and ERC20 standards to have flexible models for representing ownership and then being able to share that ownership away. And so what's really cool about this is it really kind of allows an on-ramp of any type of Web2 digital asset for data and AI to be on-ramp to the world of crypto. And what's that really interesting is because we're not reinventing a standard from scratch, but really using existing ones such as NFTs and ERC20s, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So how do can an individual user control access to their own data or their applications? Just use a crypto wallet. How can a group of people all share in the upside of being able to kind of as they pull data together in order for training models? You create a DAO using existing multi-sig wallets and go from there. And so you don't have to. A lot of the existing DeFi infrastructure, we can immediately apply to your assets you've tokenized. So that can be and that gets really cool as you start to see kind of how much infrastructure is already there for this industry. So data provenance, another interesting point where, okay, how can I determine what type of data set this model is fine-tuned on or trained on? Well, you can just use existing tools like Etherscan to really be able to check the transactions of, okay, this model was trained by being able to trace, it was created from these data assets. And so you can start to really leverage the existing ecosystem of DeFi. And so why is this really important? Well, I would say that being able to kind of tokenize it with Ocean of assets to existing standards such as NFTs and ERC20s allows you to repurpose DeFi and really start to unlock new capital structures for financing this AI space. So what does that mean exactly? Let's go through one example. So we're going to talk about a use case for getting data sets, high quality data sets for fine-tuning open source models. So today, the most dominant models, GPT-4, PaLM, they're all very large closed source models that require a huge unstructured data set and a ton of compute in order to build it. So the idea can be, okay, we're never going to be able to compete with these massive closed source models because how can an open source model raise the money needed to compute at such a high level? However, recent evidence is showing that might not necessarily be the case for applications. For example, in the Phi 1 that was recently released, we're starting to see how really data quality can be much more of the determination for how good of a model is compared to the compute or any modeling techniques you may do. So they show that by able to curate a very high quality data sets, whereas more explained it almost like you would a human, like kind of textbook and examples, even though they were using a small model and a small amount of compute relative to the closed source models, they're able to have dramatic improvement increases for that. And so I believe what this can really show that in this space, by being able to access high quality data sets from curated industry professionals, open source will be able to compete with the massive compute that closed source companies will be able to provide. However, there's a very key problem with the scenario, as we're going to need high quality data sets for every industry and niche around the world. The question is, how do you incentivize that high quality data set creation? Because when you go through it, there are a few problems. So what you can do is, okay, maybe I want to curate a data set for legal or for kind of any specific PR. So you may pay industry professionals to label the data directly. Or an employer might try to make their employees do it, like Databricks did with Dolly. Or, maybe we'll just believe that the open source community will step up and people will voluntarily just create this high quality data sets and make it available for free. However, in practicality, this probably is not going to be the case. For one, as we start to have to hire already industry professionals, such as in software development and kind of legal, they are already making a lot of money. And so being able to pay them like at a fixed rate might not be that attractive, especially when you consider that these employees that they're kind of labeling the data, they're really automating themselves out of future jobs, as people that retain ownership of that data set will be able to create much more downstream value by training a model on it. And then lastly, like the incentives of open source are just very difficult, because any closed source company will be able to easily take and utilize any open source any open source data sets or software released. So the question is like, how can you, and so you can start to see this with like Scale AI, one of the top leading people for kind of labeling data sets. They're asking software engineers for $25 an hour in order to start creating data sets. And they want this fixed rate because the outlay they pay up front is going to be far less compared to the long-term value of having a data set they can use to have their own models that they can replace software engineering and enhance them in the future. So the question is, how can you help solve this like incentive problem? One way is with data DAOs. And so you can easily spin up a data DAO today with kind of the existing infrastructure. You can kind of mint a data set with an Ocean NFT and tokenize it around a multi-sig, which allows people to share ownership of that asset. You can attach licenses to it that were similar to the kind of original Falcon one, requiring a percentage of downstream revenue created from it. Or you can create many different type of licenses depending on the price you want to have. And so then with that, you can really leverage existing crypto infrastructure for financing that. So that's really cool, where now instead of having to create a data set, individuals, even like about 10 of them, can come together, create a very high quality data set, and then for their specific niche, and then they can start to have very flexible payment options. They can have perpetuity payments from downstream models, or they can make it, okay, you don't have to pay up front, but you have a percentage of revenue until a certain number is reached as a cap off. You can also use smart contracts like wallets to really have a hierarchy of who gets paid different amounts. So this really helps the servicing terms because of crypto. And so this really kind of creates things for multiple parties, where for data labelers are incentivized to do this, because now instead of having like a one-time cost up front, they're getting passive income. They'll be able to and take part in the downstream revenue of their work in exchange for transferring their knowledge to AI. And then for being able to service that, they can easily, instead of having to connect many different bank accounts and trust a singular person to handle paying everyone, they can just use a simple wallet and have trustless like data revenue sharing amongst their work. So people from different countries, different people that don't really need to trust each other very well, can come together and create high quality data sets. For businesses, this is very big because they'll be able to kind of avoid upfront capital investments in order to pay for their stuff, and they can have significantly increased regulatory compliance and servicing by having proof of where they got their data from. And so with this, you start to have a really cool data value creation loop, where people that create the data can take part in the upside and earn additional profits, which can then go back to making better models, which creates more data, which go then back to the original creators, creating a sustainable loop. And this is really just the start of what you can do now with kind of access to greater capital with tokenized assets represented by NFTs and ERC20s. We'll be able to start having cool aspects such as pulling investment from individuals to kind of lock up and pay for the compute for training models, allowing them to kind of, again, take part in downstream upside. Instead, for fast-growing AI startups, instead of locking up their cash, like having to pay for kind of the inference costs for their customers, they can have that financed, and so allow them to use their capital for kind of more growth initiatives like expanding or fine-tuning. And for fast-growing startups, they'll be able to fund their marketing costs by having proof of their success on-chain. With revenue-based financing, people can easily loan to a wallet and then directly plug into their smart contract to be able to service that loan. So just to conclude for this, the reason I believe that capital is kind of a silver bullet for for crypto and AI adoption is because we'll be able to, because once the more and more things that happen on chain, the more easy it is to compose different types of financial products to finance it. And so while all the kind of more direct first order effects of why crypto and AI are obvious, such as provenance and kind of the ability for identities and knowing what is real and what's real, the second order effect of once everything is on chain, you could have much stronger capital financing products attached to it. That second order effect will be one of more of the bigger silver bullets for crypto and AI adoption. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Christian. That's really interesting. So we have a couple of minutes for questions. First, I have one from Sandeep who asks for the paper that you cited on data quality over quantity.
Cool. I found the exact link for it. It was a recent one where they kind of trained a smaller model. But what they did was like really high, it curated the data set in a much higher way, where they made it more like a textbook, where not only did they provide examples, they had high annotations explaining what exactly was happening in the code, what decisions they were making. So they kind of almost like how a textbook is better suited for learning from a human because it has both examples and instructions. The same thing was applied to the kind of fine-tuning this model. And so even though it had a small model, it had really outperformed compared to similar sized models because of higher data quality. And yeah, exactly. Kind of like Mechanical Turk on steroids from Katie Rush is a good example, where now instead of like having a middleman kind of managing that, people can directly take advantage and create new type of products that fit them.
Yeah, that's great. So I have maybe a kind of an open-ended question that maybe you could touch on. So the theme for our last event was setting standards for interoperability, and a lot of what you talked about made it quite clear that there's different incentives when you have open source models and open source tools, but then closed businesses that stand to make a profit from them. So in our space, I think we often are prioritizing open source, and that matters a lot to us. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about interoperability and setting standards, and what you think we could do to maybe keep the strengths of open source, but also be able to have a kind of rich ecosystem of actors pursuing their own goals.
Right. So in terms of standards, I think that NFTs really provide a really great package for representing ownership. And so that already has great tooling around it. And ERC20 is kind of create a really great way for flexible different stuff. So I think the key for managing that trade-off between open source and like still commercial value is to have multiple flexible licenses. Allow open source, and then with a license that like, okay, this is only for academic value. So you can download it for free. But anyone that does has to follow a credential check. And so if they leak it, they are liable for kind of like any leakage. While also having another license for commercial, where, okay, now you can kind of use this for commercial value, but now you need to pay certain rights. And so I don't think it will be only one license for every asset where, okay, this is either open source for free or this is closed source and commercial. There'll need to be flexibility between, okay, for academic purposes, this is open source so people can do research. But then also if you want to use it for commercial purposes, you need to use this license and get it from here. And being able to have all that provenance of who's using what license directly on chain will be kind of the key to have for like providing that.
Awesome. I think Jason H has mentioned TC307 standards. I'm not familiar with those.
I'm also not familiar with that.
Oh, it's an ISO standard, blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, decentralized identity standard for the identification of subjects and objects.
Oh, cool. Exactly. Stuff like that, where it's like now everyone, since we're all working on the similar substrate with like using crypto and all that, we'll be able to kind of leverage identity standards, like stuff being built on Ceramic and all there. For, okay, now I can lock in for data labelers. They can kind of show, okay, from my wallet, I'm credentialing, I have software experience, I have a doctorate. So the data sets they create will have much higher trust and higher quality. Okay, this is not just garbage. This was created by a person with a high level of knowledge in the field.
Cool. All right, so we're going to go to break, but maybe you could quickly answer Holly's question. Holly asks, are there any modules being built on Safe that show how DataDAO users can share their data and track their submissions?
Not currently, but something we're kind of looking in development. I'm really hoping to plan something around this at a hackathon and EVCC. And so the kind of tooling has always been there to do this. And so now we're looking to help kind of bring 2 and 2 together in EVCC. So anyone that might be interested in kind of spinning up their own data DAOs or really come together and start creating high quality data sets for coding, like legal, really anything you guys are interested in, let's meet up at EVCC and kind of start building this together.
Right on. Okay, thank you, Christian. That's a very interesting presentation and a great discussion as well.
Thanks, guys.